Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock, and always smiling because I have these great pre-conversations with these beautiful, amazing souls that come on my show. And I have another one today. So Dr. Diane Mueller is nationally recognized as a Lyme disease, mold illness, and functional medicine expert who many doctors turn to for advice on treating severe cases of chronic diseases. She's also the founder of My Lyme Doc, an alternative medical practice that focuses on treating Lyme disease and other difficult to treat conditions like mold, fibro, gastrointestinal problems, and autoimmune disease. So welcome, Dr. Diane.
Oh, thank you, Teri. I'm really looking forward to being here, especially like you said, after our pre-convo.
Oh, for sure. And I told you, I said, in stalking your websites and your work and all you're doing, oh my gosh, I'm excited personally because my audience knows this journey I've been on in the last 3 years of mycotoxin poisoning from mold toxicity, and then this autoimmune psoriasis rash that popped up, and everything else is under control except that last little bit. And so I'm personally excited to learn from you today. So yeah.
Thank you.
Let's dive into mold since I brought it up. And I guess really like your insights. I know one of the questions I saw that we could talk about was, hold on. I had it start on here and now it's, oh yeah. So Lyme disease and mold illness occur at such a high rate, as well as mind-body approach to aid in the recovery and prevent recurrence. So that's like such a loaded, wonderful question.
Yeah. So is the question then on where, I'm sorry, I don't totally understand the question of that. Is that where the mind body connection is, or where do you want me to go with this?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that mind body connection and the impact of, I guess, focusing on that as a healing aspect has on recovery.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the first place to orient people from a standpoint of Lyme and mold is these are the great mimickers, right? These are the things that like can mimic almost every disease process out there. It's like the symptom list is 100 things long. And oftentimes if people have Lyme, they also have mold. And if they have mold, they also have Lyme. So, to unpack this and talk about mind body and talk about what's going on here, I think there's a few different things to say. One is anytime we are talking about Lyme or mold or both, we are talking about an immune problem. We're talking about a nervous system problem. We're often talking about a problem even in the circulatory system. And these are some of the reasons why the symptoms are so severe and widespread is because the nerves connect everything. And with Lyme and mold, we can have this situation where our nerves are being attacked, they get inflamed, and the nerve cells can even die. And that can be scary, but it's fixable. So, I always like to say that anytime I scare people, like, this is fixable stuff. We just have to find it. Same thing with the circulation, right? We can see things happen with these disease processes where all of a sudden, like, we don't grow capillaries as much, these tiny little blood vessels that bring the nutrition and bring all these amazing things all over our cells. So we see that impact. We see the immune system get dysregulated. So we have these widespread symptoms and these widespread systems and organ systems that get involved, leading to these crazy pictures. Okay, so that's the body. And then the mind, and where the mind comes in, really to take the very, very simple bird's eye view of this is really to say we have these two major branches of our nervous system that a lot of people have heard of, that fight or flight and that rest and digest. But what doesn't really get talked about as much when we're talking about these two major branches of our autonomic nervous system is when are we sending those molecules of heal and repair? When is the body actually healing? And when the body's in that fight or flight, that survival mode where we're kicking out adrenaline, we're kicking out the stress hormone cortisol, we're not sending those molecules that are saying repair. And the vicious cycle that people get into with the mind that's common and normal is where we can get into this sense of like all this internal dialogue of, am I going to get well? Is it in my mind? Like, am I, what is happening in this worry and this concern? And that voice inside of us, that's natural, that's normal, that I encourage you to feel like very, very validated for being scared and frustrated and all of those things. Like all of that's normal. But the vicious cycle is then when we're feeling those things, those natural, normal things, we're oftentimes kicking out adrenaline and cortisol, which gets us into that fight or flight. And then we're also not sending those signals to heal and repair. So some of that mind body connection is really getting people out of this natural, normal, very validated vicious circle of the mind, so that even though we're frustrated, even though we feel like scared as heck, a lot of times, that we can actually break this cycle so we can get the nervous system out of this cycle and into sending those molecules that say heal and repair.
Yes, thank you so much. And I know as you were speaking, I said to myself, oh my gosh, I just made a list the other day when, like I said, all my labs are back to normal except this rash. And I was like, okay, do I need to change my probiotic? Do I need to get into the ocean more? Do I need to be out in the sun? Should I really do a tanning bed? Should I, like I was like all these lists, and I'm not kidding. It was like 25 different things. And then I could feel myself getting so like overwhelmed. Like, I don't know where to go. Like, what do I do to get the last of this, cleared out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. And that's why, that's I can understand from like my personal experience. Like when I was in the height of my illness, I would wake up every morning and I would do this body scan. I'd be like, okay, what's wrong today? Okay, my head. Oh, my head's like a 10 out of 10. Oh, I can't move. Oh, it's hard to walk. It's hard to get out of bed. Oh my gosh, my fatigue's so bad, but my digestion's okay today. And I would just be doing these like body scans every day of this list. And, it's like even talking about that, I can remember like my nervous system like heating up with every symptom that I was tracking in my head that was wrong, right? So that's why I like to emphasize it's not that we're doing anything wrong. This is the natural way the brain is oriented. The brain's about survival and fixing problems for us, right? So it's looking for those ways. It's looking for the ways of what's wrong so it can figure out how to fix things. So there's not a problem with that. There's just a problem when we get stuck in that and we're just sending out those stress molecules over and over again.
Yeah, which brings me to one of the questions I have. I had read in more than one space that those with trauma history, because we lived in a constant state of hyperarousal for so long, weakened our adrenals, weakened our immune system. And so that's why, like there were so many of us living in this house, and I was the canary in the coal mine. Like I was the one that reacted really, really poorly to this mold exposure. And so is that accurate that those with trauma history do have more of a tendency to experience issues?
I think the trauma history, yes. And the other thing when I answer this question, I want to add on is going through these major chronic diseases, they're their own trauma, right? And so one of the things that can even happen from a trauma standpoint, whether it's a history throughout childhood or whether it's simply the trauma of chronic disease, like if it's mold, so many people, it's very, very common that once you've been in a moldy house, and it can lead to these feelings of like, I'm never going to be safe in the world. I can't travel. I can't go to friends' houses. I can't live. There's this really feeling, this underlying deep rooted feeling of the world's not safe for me. And so there's a similarity, right, with like the chronic illness trauma and a lot of trauma from, say, childhood or earlier in life around safety and well-being. And no matter where the trauma comes from, there is an element where our nervous system learns how to be a certain way. And that's why I use the word like PTSD, because I think there's a huge analogy here with how PTSD, works. It's like, veteran getting back from fighting in a war and a car backfires. And the next thing you know, this person's under a tree or a bush and they jump because of like, they think the car backfiring is a gun, right? Because that's that program. The nervous system gets so programmed for a little tiny stimulus from the environment and a hyper amount of response, right? And that's, it's absolutely part of this vicious cycle we're talking about. You totally hit the nail on the head that it's like we have all of these things that can be triggering us. And there are these little tiny things. Maybe it's something that, say, a partner said, or a kid said, or a friend said, or a boss said, and it just subconsciously reminds us of a state or a feeling back from when that trauma occurred. And the next thing we know, we have a ton of adrenaline, we have a ton of cortisol, and we're stuck in this vicious cycle again of not sending those molecules to heal. So 100%, absolutely right.
Yes. Well, thank you. And again, bringing it back to me, I said the other day, oh my gosh, I'm wondering if, even though we had 3 remediation teams come in that cleaned the ducts, cleaned everything up, had an environmentalist engineer come out, sealed the house, did tests, said, oh my gosh, this is the most mold-free house in all of South Carolina. We're still here, and it's wonderful, and the air is clean, and all the tests are clean. But I think my trauma brain, even though I've done a lot of healing work, is like, oh, we're still here. At any moment, it could come back. What if? And so, yeah, I'm just really curious now if that's why my body's not just still kind of holding on to this last little bit of like, we got you. We're going to protect you.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely could be. And especially if you feel like you've run a ton of different tests, like sometimes I do see for people that once a home is clear, then the body, like the cells, because our cells hold so many toxins, right? So I can see sometimes, and I see this in lab work, where once the home's clean, then the cells start dumping more and more and more. But typically, when I see that, what happens is people start feeling better. They still have some symptoms, but we actually see on a lab work, like, oh, mold, and we're talking about mold here, like those levels in their urine, for example, go up, even though their symptoms are getting better because their cells are dumping so much. So we always want to consider, for situations that it's like, oh, there could be still some of the physical stuff working out as well. But if you've truly looked at, a wide variety of things from infections to toxins to gut from a standpoint of infections and leaky gut, and looking at hormones and looking at micronutrients, and really done a good gamut, and it's like things are normal after normal after normal, then it really could be your immune system re-regulating, your adrenals coming back online, and your nervous system just resetting from the trauma of it, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's so fascinating. And I never thought about, I just hadn't heard about that of, yeah, like your cells are holding on to this and then it's just doing that dump and letting go of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So now do you run tests for folks? Do you work one-on-one, like bringing clients to work with you?
Yeah, I work in a couple different ways. So we do one-on-one in my office. I live in the Colorado area, and we do have to have one visit a year, for people that want to work with us one-on-one that's in Colorado. But I have great group programs. And this is one of the ways that I have found to work with people internationally is through these group education programs where we can get tests ordered. We can get tests ordered through a lot of different countries we can actually get them shipped to. So for people living, in different countries that are having a hard time accessing good quality tests, we have ways around that. And so, yeah, so the group programs are also super lovely because the price point's really low. And so for people where it's like, because this stuff, it's like when we run so many tests and there's so many things and there's houses and there's so many different things that unfortunately sometimes just have to be spent, where money has to be spent. The group's a really cool way of helping people internationally that also keeps the price point significantly lower too. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, my son's in Colorado, hence why I smiled
Ah,
really big. He's in Denver, so
oh, amazing. Yeah.
one of
I'm
them.
in Golden, right outside of Denver.
Oh yeah, yeah. When we
Yeah.
visited out there, we visited Golden. That's awesome.
Yes. That's where I'm at.
Yes, it's beautiful. Oh my
It
gosh.
is. It is. It
Yes,
really is.
wonderful. Very cool. And then I said to you, oh my gosh, you have a book. I'm so excited to learn about the book. So talk to us about your book.
Yeah, the book really goes through my 4-step process on how to work with these complicated chronic illness. So in many ways, I look at it as just like, kind of the chronic illness survivor's guide, right? Because it'll talk about what sort of symptoms you should look out for, what kind of lab tests, you might be missing in your lab test protocol, what kind of things you may have not thought about. And then I walk people through basically how I treat. And that's what I do in the group programs too. It's really about putting like power back in people's hands and let me teach you how to think so that not only are people getting well, but also staying well. And it's in the group, like with the protocols, like one of the things that I think is super important is I have a chart on there. It's actually in page 256 of my book where I go through of like, you have this particular mold toxin, you should do it this way. If you have that particular mold toxin, you should do it that way. So we can get pretty granular on some of the information. And that's where it's, it's like I said, it's like teaching people so it can be really tailored for them. And one of the things I find so commonly in these chronic illness cases is people get so excited when we find like Lyme or mold and these things because it's like, finally, we found a reason for this. And the excitement, also coupled oftentimes with like fear and a lot of different emotions, is many times it can drive people to jump into some of these treatments really quickly. And so one of the things that we cover in the book that's really important to say here is making sure that we're doing work to build the body up is so important. What a lot of people don't realize is killing and detoxifying, like killing things like Lyme and detoxing mold and other things, is so energetically expensive. And what I mean by that is we use a ton of B vitamins, we use a ton of nutrients in order to be able to detoxify and kill. So if you've had these things for a while, the likelihood is that you're nutrient deficient, your adrenals, like we've talked about already, are not regulated. You don't probably have a well-functioning thyroid, gland and normal thyroid levels. And so oftentimes I find that when we do this work of restoring some of the nutrients and getting the thyroid and the adrenal glands back working again, that treatment oftentimes is easier. People react less because the body just is stronger to go through it. So that's part of what I talk to people about in the book is like, a common treatment order, but also, what do you do if it's not working? I even have a chapter on there on like how to interview doctors to make sure that you're with the right clinician. So it's really kind of step A to Z on, on how to move forward with these sorts of treatments.
Well, I think that's amazing because boy, did I need that book.
Yeah, I'm sending
You
you a
know,
copy, even though you're past
when you're
it.
clawing your way through it. I mean, I just didn't know what to do. By the grace of God, ended up with a holistic nutritionist, and she was the one who finally said, "Teri, you might want to test your house for mold. I think you have mycotoxin poisoning." And I just remember crying my eyes out because I had kept telling my family, "I don't know what's wrong. I feel like I've been poisoned." Like I kept saying the word poison. But I learned the hard way that I had to do low and slow because I
Yeah,
was herxing. I was having herx reactions, which for those who don't know is Herxheimer. Is that right?
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, you got
And
it.
yeah, my body was just trying to like, get it out. It was aspergillus. And so it was just like trying, get it out of me. And yeah, and then I was reacting not so good.
Yeah, yeah. And those Herxheimer's, just so everybody totally understands that, because I think it's such an important point, is really what's happening there is when there's more toxins in the body than the body can deal with. So when we start oftentimes treating, for example, just like when I started talking about the cells dumping toxins. So when the cells like all of a sudden are like, oh, we're getting this stuff out, what can happen is we can get this hyper release of toxins from the cells, which sounds good, but our detox pathways, which is, the liver, and then once things go through the liver, it's getting things out through the urine and stool. We can get toxins out through the breath and the skin, but all these different elimination pathways in our body, they all have like this limit to how fast they can actually work. So we're dumping more toxins faster than these organs of elimination can keep up with. It's literally like we are actually, from a blood level, from an impact level, when we're detoxing, we're actually increasing that load on our organs, on our brain. Not good, right? So, and some people, I'm so glad you brought up Herxheimer, because sometimes people read things online and think like, oh, we should just push through this. We should just get it out and push through it. I don't see that being a very good idea. And because one, like you mentioned, like you don't feel very great when this happens. But two, all of these toxins are causing inflammation and damage. And, some of these toxins actually cause cells to die. Like I said, it's fixable, But we want to prevent that as much as possible because it makes that repair process later, even though it feels like, okay, we're moving slower with the detox. If we can do it in a way where we're not damaging our system so much, it really makes the repair process go so much easier later on.
Oh, yes, for sure. And
Yeah.
I had something pop in my head and then it popped back out. So, well, I don't remember what I was going to ask
Okay, come
because
back
I
to that.
went to, my brain went to, oh my gosh, I'm going to travel to Colorado just to work with you because I mean, I'm loving that you understand so much of this journey. Oh, what I wanted to ask was, and it's kind of a little bit of a left turn, but, so my sister and I were talking earlier, and she had sent me a picture of us when we were little, and so I was probably like 4 or 5 years old, and it was this neighborhood, but I was always playing in the woods, and I told her without even thinking about it. I said, "Oh yeah, I remember Mom always heating up a tweezers and pulling ticks out of my head when I was a little kid," and so I've had Lyme tested twice, but it always comes back negative. Can you talk a little bit about Lyme and how? Isn't there like there can be false negatives, I guess is the right wording
Yeah,
for it.
100%. And, and some of it is like depending upon the test. And we always have to remember with any lab work, the test is only as good as the test that's run, as well as the clinician that is interpreting the test. And so for a long while, the test that was the gold standard was starting with a test for Lyme called the ELISA, which is an immune test. And the ELISA has one study said it had about a 67% chance of a false negative. And so they have, the criteria for the testing has been updated a little bit since then. And so depending upon, and that was just in the last year. So it's, very possible that you did that test. But the most standard way that people are moving on from there is what's called the Western blot. And what the Western blot is doing is it's looking for these proteins of the Lyme bacteria. They're called bands. And essentially, we're looking for our immune system to react to these proteins. And if the immune system reacts to enough of these proteins, then we say it's positive. Two problems with this. One is some of these bands, some of these proteins are found on Lyme bacteria only, very, very specific. And the standard way we are interpreting this still from a conventional standpoint, which most of us were taught in school, is you have to have a lot of these proteins present. And even if there's one of these proteins present, and we know that the only thing that can have this protein is Borrelia, the bacteria that causes Lyme, we still say you have to have a lot of these proteins. And so most of us in the Lyme literate community have this way of interpreting this, that it's like, well, if you have one of these proteins and nothing else can cause this, why do we have to have four more? Right. So that's one thing. And that's why I'm saying it's really important to work with a Lyme literate clinician, because they're going to understand how to make sure to sort through some of that and make sure the test is really interpreted with some of that updated information. Now, the second thing is the way we're classically defining Lyme is it's a bacteria. The bacteria is called Borrelia burgdorferi. But like all bacteria, just like staph, a lot of people have heard of staph, and there's all these different types of staph, for example. Borrelia is the same way. I look at them, and the way I look at this is like Borrelia has a lot of siblings. Borrelia has a lot of brothers and sisters. And Borrelia itself, from a Lyme perspective, is Borrelia burgdorferi. But we have another sister called Borrelia afzelii, and we have a brother called Borrelia miyamotoi, and we have tons of these brothers and sisters. Conventionally, we're only testing for Borrelia burgdorferi, but all of these other siblings can actually cause all these similar Lyme-like, symptoms. We might not classically medically call it Lyme, but I would, because it causes all the same symptoms, and it's basically largely from the same bacteria. So that's where those standard tests are not testing for all of these siblings. And that's where using some of those specialized companies, like I use a company called Vibrant Wellness. Love them, love them, love them. I make $0 for saying this. I just think they are amazing because they've spent so much time, effort, and R&D dollars going into making sure that they're testing thoroughly. And that's where we can get all of these other bacteria siblings, like I'm talking about, to make sure we get a thorough test.
Wow. See my brain go, poo. Yeah, that's so amazing. And that's a test that someone could order through you.
Yep, that test, and that test is so cool. We can do that in the one-on-one. We can do that group. We can get that done in a lot of different countries around the world. We can do that by finger prick at home. So the company just mails you a little kit where you just like almost like doing a blood finger prick, like blood sugar test. Same thing. You just like prick your finger with a tiny little drop of blood. You put it on this little index card. You mail it to the lab, and they send you the results. So it's super, super easy. And it's a very easy, like I said, it's a very easy thing for me to help people with throughout most countries.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. And again, I'm so curious because my understanding now, just out of curiosity, are mold and Lyme, because I haven't researched a lot about Lyme, I don't know a lot about it. Are their symptoms similar? How do you differentiate? I mean, what makes you like lean towards, oh, this might be going on?
Yeah, you're asking the best questions. It's so important because I think it's one of the things that happens really commonly in practice is people get a Lyme diagnosis or they get a mold diagnosis and they're not getting well. And they think it's like, okay, well, I have to change my treatment. And sometimes that's true, but oftentimes it's that it's only part of the problem. And they go so similarly together because if we were to look at a Lyme list and a mold list as far as symptoms, it's going to be almost identical. Now, there are some textbook things, right? So, like, very common to have pain with both. Pain with mold has more of a tendency to affect like the smaller joints, fingers, toes, wrists, right? Lyme pain has a tendency to affect the bigger joints, shoulders, knees, hips. Lyme pain tends to mobilize. One day it's in the shoulder, the next day it's in the knee. Mold pain tends to be the same. It's like, oh my gosh, am I getting rheumatoid arthritis? My fingers hurt every day, every day, every day. So there's these textbook things, right? That like, if we're truly operating from the classic way, and I do see it present that way, but I also see that, as humans, we're not textbooks and it doesn't always read that way. So because the symptoms are so similar, most of the time I recommend like if people have a widespread, group of symptoms where it's like the way I described it is like in the conventional world where if your symptom list would be like, oh, I need to see the gut doctor, the gastro guy because I have a gut problem, and I need to see the endo person because I have a hormone problem, and I need to see the ENT person because I have a sinus problem. So if you're breaking it down, you're like, yeah, if I were to do this like conventionally, I have to see all these different specialists. That's telling us there's a lot of widespread symptoms involved. And that's usually a key mark sign for Lyme and mold. So typically, I find that it's really good to test for both. But the other way, if you're really like financially, like there's just no way you can do it, is truly just pick one. If you have any of the textbook symptoms, start with that. If you don't, just pick one, see if it's positive, start treating it if it is. And if you're not getting well, then it's like, okay, well, now it's really time to find room in the budget to test the other because it's very likely both. And I can't tell you the number of times I see people come into my office, especially with a Lyme diagnosis, that have tried every therapy on the sun, and they've been to 24 doctors and they're like expecting me to have this magical therapy. I'm like, well, the magical therapy is actually that you miss the mold. It's not that there's a magical treatment for Lyme. So we really, truly, I wish there was some sort of like cool thing in medicine where it's like, oh yeah, we can hone in and be like, exactly because of the symptoms, it's got to be this. But we really, truly, for most people, need to test for both.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So brilliant. Gosh, again, I'm like blown away. And I think of Star Trek when they had that little detector that just was like boop, and it would just bring up like what is going on. Oh my gosh, how I wish we had that.
I have a feeling we're gonna get there. Like, I don't know in our lifetimes, but with all the AI stuff happening in the world, I think we're
Yeah.
gonna see stuff like that happen eventually.
Oh, that would be amazing and so cool. Yes, yes. Well, and again, now I'm like, oh, I so want to get a Lyme test done because just like you said, like I've gotten so much better. All my labs, doing great. Like my electrolytes were out of whack. My vitamin Ds were out of whack. My thyroid was out of whack. Like everything was crazy. Everything's back to normal, but this crazy rash. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. And tomorrow I'm going for a scan, which I'm just not, I can't stand going Western med route because I just do better holistically, but When you have to, you have to. Because I've had this lump in my throat. They've put a camera down there twice. And I'm like, and so my brain, being anxiety girl that I am, it's like, oh my gosh, is it a mold colony? Like, do I have a ball in there of like mold hanging on?
I mean, there could be lymphatic, your lymph could be very, very congested there from mold, but I'm also glad you brought that up because I always like, while I tend to be very functional and naturopathic, and that is my training, I do think it's really important to consider conventional stuff. And like from a mold Lyme perspective with the nervous system involvement, like there can be scary neurological symptoms happening and diseases happening. And most of the time, I don't find that when people go for imaging, it's not the big, bad, scary stuff 99% of the time, but it's really nice to rule that out just to be sure, because then we know it's not that stuff. And then we can, we know we have time. We know the progression rate is not crazy, fast where we need to worry about it. And we have time to actually do the deeper root cause related things. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I do think it's an important thing to throw in here around like, hey, let's make sure we're doing good testing and ruling out that bad stuff too, just to make sure we have all of the information.
Oh, thank you. Tear me up a little bit because I was, like, oh, I've been pushing it off and pushing it off. And then I was like, no, like you have to make sure. Let's just make sure that we can check that box off.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Because the
Um,
other thing it does beyond just like being medically prudent is it's so calming to the, we're talking about the nervous system and the nervous system dysregulation and the worry and all the things that happen. It's so calming to be like, okay, this is not that 6-letter word that starts with C, right? This is not all these other diseases we worry about as humans. And crossing these things off, that alone makes these kind of tests valuable. It's just like calming the system. So it's like, I know it's not this scary stuff. Okay, now let's get to the root, but it really can calm the nervous system too.
yes. Oh, yes, I 100% agree. Well, I could just sit and talk to you for, gosh, I don't know, days, weeks, because just so much knowledge, and I just love it. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I certainly wanted to give you an opportunity to leave folks with any final thoughts or anything that we didn't get a chance to touch upon.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thought, one of the biggest like messages I always like to communicate in scenarios like this is trusting your intuition. It's why my book is called It's Not in Your Mind, is because so many times people either have been told that, or when lab tests are normal, whether it's a clinician telling them that, or it's really common too. I find that people second guess themselves and like, okay, well, if there's nothing wrong on the lab test, like, could I be imagining this? Do I really feel as bad as I do? And, and the message I really like to leave people with is like, you know, in your heart, like I really believe in the power of human intuition. And if something is wrong and you really feel like something's off in your body, believe that. It's like just because medicine has not found the reason yet doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that medicine hasn't found the reason yet. So that's usually that message that I like to leave people is like keep searching, and like whether it's me, you can always get a hold of me at my Lyme doc, but whether it's me or whether it's another clinician, there's somebody out there that I truly believe is going to have the answers for you. So just keep searching. You're not alone. There's a reason. The body doesn't freak out for just no reason, right? There's always going to be a reason why the body goes offline.
Oh, 100%. I'm such a root cause kind of gal that,
Yeah, me
yes. And
too.
the intuition part of it. Like when I've been on a healing journey for, gosh, 13 years. And so a lot of meditation and mindfulness, but I started asking my body in meditative state, what do you need? And I kept hearing, this was probably about a year, maybe even 2 years ago. I kept hearing calcium, 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 like I just, for whatever reason. And I was like, oh my God, I did totally cut like milk out of I cut dairy out because I was doing an elimination diet. I was having histamine issues. And so I was like, oh, my body is not getting the calcium that it was getting. And so I just had to make some adjustments that way. And it helped.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I do think that it's really helpful to have an outside professional on board. And it's also important to like listen to yourself and let yourself be a guide. So both of these things are a huge part of the healing journey. So I really love your story.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, so how do folks connect with you, get your book?
Yeah, so super easy, everybody. So it's a very easy website to remember. My Lyme Doc. Just, make sure you spell Lyme, Lyme, like the disease and not like the fruits. So mylymedoc.com. And I have tons of stuff on there. I have a video ebook that is totally free. If you do want my book, it's super lovely. It's a self-guided journey. You can find it on Amazon, really in like a lot of the Amazon stores around the world. I have it published. So it's called It's Not in Your Mind. I would encourage you guys to go to my website and get that free downloadable ebook that'll pop up for you to get. And it's all about Lyme and mold. But when you do that, you will be on my mailing list. And I am doing a huge relaunch for my book this summer. I am finally getting the Audible version of it done, which has not been done yet. So I'm doing a big relaunch around that. And so I'll have all sorts of fun stuff and all sorts of, supportive information and extra bonuses coming down the pipeline this summer with that. So it's a good time to jump on my mailing list to make sure you get all the giveaways and the bonuses and the fun, things that we do when we relaunch books.
Awesome. I'm signing up as soon as we're done. So
Hooray.
well, it's just been such a joy. Thank you so much for educating me and my audience, and for the beautiful work that you do.
Oh, thank you, Teri. It's been truly a pleasure to talk to you today. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. Remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock here. Just wanted to thank you again for being a part of this healing space and my hashtag Hope for Healing journey. Thank you for sharing, liking, inviting others to join, listening in. You've really helped this show blossom. It has now been downloaded in 136 countries and is in the top 2% globally out of 3.2 million shows, which is just amazing. And it's all because of you and your tuning in and inviting others and sharing and liking and loving. And your reviews on Apple really help too. My goal is to hit 100 5-star reviews by the end of the year. And I am closing in on that. So if you are listening in on Apple or Apple Podcasts, please go and rate the show and leave a review if you absolutely love it. And I would be most appreciative. Also, if you would like to receive my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, please be sure to go to teriwellbrock.com. It's TERI, just one R, WELLBROCK.com. And I have a gift to send you for signing up for that monthly Hope for Healing newsletter. Plus, there are many other resources listed on that page, including a resource library. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.